It is another edition of the news in Africa and the world. We open today's edition in Burundi. Following the sudden death of outgoing President Pierre Nkurunziza, the government has declared 7 days of national mourning and flags will be flown at half-mast. According to government reports, he died of a heart attack aged 55. The president's death comes at a critical time for Burundi, less than 2 months before he was due to hand power to his successor Evariste Ndayishimiye after May's controversial presidential election. Meantime, Speaker of the Burundian National Assembly, Pascal Nyabenda, will lead the transition government until August 20, as stipulated by the Constitution. Pierre Nkurunziza was sworn in as president in 2005 and re-elected in 2010. His decision to run for a controversial third term in 2015 set off a failed coup and violence that caused hundreds deaths and thousands displaced out of the country. He leaves behind a nation dotted with the unmarked graves of his political opponents, an economy in tatters, and a question mark over whether infighting over his succession could divide the country's powerful generals and security chiefs. Also, Tanzanian main opposition leader Freeman Mbowe has been hospitalized after being beaten by unidentified men as he returned home early on Tuesday. Supporters of the leader say the ambush was politically motivated ahead of October's presidential election. They called on the police force to conduct a thorough investigation, saying the assailants accused him of causing trouble for the government. Police commander in Dodoma told a news conference they were investigating the incident but warned against politicizing it. Mbowe, a high-profile critic of President John Magufuli, has repeatedly accused the government of covering up the extent of Tanzania's coronavirus outbreak and failing to take the pandemic serious. On Tuesday, President Magufuli declared the East African country is coronavirus-free thanks to prayers by the citizens. Ethiopia's Renaissance Dam. 3 key Nile countries resumed negotiations on Tuesday over a giant $4.6 billion hydroelectric dam that Egypt fears will compress its water supply following months of argument. Addis Ababa began construction a decade ago, sparking tensions with Khartoum and Cairo. According to Sudan Irrigation Minister, talks about Ethiopia's contentious mega project got underway in a positive spirit, though negativity has grown about the possibility of a deal July when Ethiopia has pledged to start filling the dam water. Sudan, long caught between the competing interests of Egypt and Ethiopia, had pushed the two sides to resume negotiations, which had been crippled since Ethiopia's keep out on the last round of talks brokered by the Trump administration in February. And we now move over to Europe, where the European Union is set to unveil a package of measures to better combat child sex abuse, which appears to be getting worse, particularly during the coronavirus lockdowns. The EU Commission is proposing a series of measures to strengthen law enforcement capacities to help children escape abuse and arrest by perpetrators. Home Affairs Commissioner Eva Johansson said she wanted a more efficient fight against the scourge of child abuse, including social media companies. She expressed worrying signs it might explode during this virus. The Commission is proposing greater cooperation not just in Europe but also in the United States. In France, after government announcement to improve the ethics of the police enforcement of law and violence, Prime Minister Edouard Philippe on June 9 traveled to the Paris suburb in Lesson for talks with police officers. He called on the respect and trust vis-à-vis the police. The Prime Minister added they wanted to convey this message at a time when emotions are very high, very legitimate and very shared, recalling the current context to the death of George Floyd, killed by police brutality in Minneapolis. The head of government, in his opening sentence, used the Declaration of Human Rights, saying, I quote, "Men are born free and equal in rights," end of quote. But George Orwell, in one of his books titled Animal Farm, ironically paints a bleak picture when he says all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others, the exact opposite of a society which is based on religious and racial differences. And in the US, George Floyd's tragic journey ended at the Houston Cemetery with touching tribute and calls for justice for the African American whose death touched the world and sparked protest against police brutality and racism. His funeral marked 6 days of mourning in 3 cities that ended with a 4-hour ceremony in the city where he grew up. Civil rights leader Al Sharpton delivered an eulogy in which he accused President Trump of showing indifference over Floyd's death and sending police a signal of impunity. Though the occasion was solemn, the church echoed with music and words of optimist remembrance for a man whose death galvanized a movement. Thanks for watching the news. Coming up at 7 p.m. is Viewpoint with me again, the Vanessa Shuyong. Until we meet, do take care and have a blessed night in the company of DBS Television.